Palazzo Albertoni Spinola, an architectural jewel that overlooks the exclusive Piazza Campitelli in the most ancient heart of Rome. The palace, the church, the fountain linked together, as we will see from an invisible thread, are the result of the talent of masters who have designed the most beautiful corners of the eternal city. But the palace and the ancient building behind it are not only buildings of extraordinary beauty. They hide a fascinating story whose implications have recently been revealed. A succession of events that have influenced the layout of the whole square. A unique story to tell. Towards the end of the 1500s, the Marquises Paluzzi degli Albertoni, descendants of an important Roman family coming into power at the time, owned an ancient building located in today's Capizzucchi Lane. In front of their elegant property stood the birthplace of their ancestor Ludovica Albertoni, a true spiritual reference of the family, a well-known figure who was revered by all the Roman people. Her house overlooked Piazza Campitelli, which then had a very different aspect from what we can admire today. So from their home, the Marquise Albertoni could see the birthplace of the saintly woman, who in this way almost watched over their daily chores. From the main entrance, the Albertoni had a continuous gaze on the sacred home, a direct contact with that very dear place. But who was this noble woman, and why was her figure the object of spontaneous devotion which came from the citizens of the capital? Ludovica Albertoni was born in this house in 1473 and was orphaned by her father when she was only 2 years old. She was raised by her paternal aunts and married very young to a brusque nobleman with whom she had 3 daughters. During her years of marriage, Ludovica became closer to the Franciscan order and started to frequent the nearby church of San Francesco a Ripa, where her tomb is preserved today with the relief that Bernini dedicated to her and which represents her ecstasy, a work that is considered one of the masterpieces of Baroque sculpture. Left a widow, Ludovica divided the property between her daughters and renounced all of her possessions. She entered the Third Order of St. Francis, spending the rest of her life helping the needy, aiding them with food, clothing, and medical care. After her death, her figure was immediately the object of devotion. Pope Clement X officially approved the cult on January 28, 1671. Meanwhile, in 1587, right in front of the place where the saintly woman was born, the Marquise Albertoni and the other families whose palaces overlooked the square had a splendid fountain built. The work was entrusted to a great artist, very much in vogue at that time, Giacomo Della Porta, who had already built several buildings in the city center, as well as some extraordinary fountains commissioned by the Pope. The Albertoni Marquises asked Giacomo Della Porta to design a building on the land that became their property in front of their ancient palazzetto. However, they asked the master to do the impossible, to maintain the visual continuity between the palazzetto and the house of the saintly woman. Giacomo Della Porta accepts the challenge and designs his masterpiece. But who is Giacomo Della Porta? A pupil of Michelangelo and later of Vignola, he created a large number of extraordinary works in Rome. Palaces, churches, and fountains of that era were entrusted to this architect of extraordinary talent. When Michelangelo died, Giacomo Della Porta inherited his title of the Roman people's architect, as well as Capitoline architect. He was entrusted with the construction of the dome of St. Peter's Basilica. The dome that we admire today, and which is generally attributed to Michelangelo, was actually redesigned, restudied, and built by the architect Giacomo Della Porta. Michelangelo's drawing, in fact, which was a perfect semi-sphere, according to the statistical calculations carried out by Giacomo Della Porta, was impracticable, because the burden of the structure would have weighed too much on the basal tympanum and would have literally opened it like the segments of an orange. When Michelangelo died, only the tympanum was built and not the dome. Della Porta, 21 years after Buonarroti's death, redesigned the dome and built it. In the end, it turned out to be more slender than 17 meters and much more beautiful than the impossible Michelangelo design. Thus, the beauty of Rome, its evocative charm, is largely due to the talent and tireless work of that great master who was Giacomo Della Porta, the true designer of the Dome of St. Peter's, today the symbol of the Eternal City. Giacomo Della Porta then designed the palace intended by the Marquises, and in the last years of the 1500s, he began to build the load-bearing structures and the first internal partitions. But a sudden death overtook him in 1602. Upon the death of the master, his second-in-command, Girolamo Rainaldi, with whom he had been collaborating for some time now, took over. The disciple thus had the task of aligning the facade of the building with the new layout of the square. The facade was completed around 1616. In the meantime, popular devotion to the saintly Ludovica was growing steadily. That of the Virgin of Santa Maria in Portico, depicted in an ancient icon originating from the miraculous apparition that took place in Santa Galla in the very distant 524 AD. In 1619, the saintly woman's home was transformed into a small church. Later, the building was further transformed by Pope Alexander VII into a large votive church to celebrate the end of the plague that had decimated the population of southern Italy and had threatened to spread to Rome. The new building served to house the sacred icon of the Virgin Mary. The work was entrusted to Carlo Rainaldi, Girolamo's son, assistant to Maestro Della Porta, who had carried out the overall project of the building. Carlo Rainaldi, who knew the intentions of his two masters well, built the great portal exactly where the door of the house of the saintly woman stood, with millimeter precision. In 1667, the facade of the Church of Santa Maria in Campitelli was therefore completed. A few years later, in 1679, the beautiful fountain was moved about 30 meters towards the southeastern side of the square because, according to the state archives, it disturbed because of the lingering of the coachmen and other servants. Today, it still reveals all its splendor, right next to the Palazzo Albertoni Spinola, which for over 400 years has been reflected in the clear water of the fountain. Palazzo Albertoni Spinola has recently revealed its secret, which had been forgotten in the annals of time. The project of the building, conceived by the genius of Della Porta, respects the will of the Marquises who had commissioned it. The perspective view that is obtained from it creates a sort of apparently inexplicable optical effect. In front of the door there are the columns of the church. But moving away, the perspective changes. To witness the miracle, you have to walk through the entrance gallery that leads orthogonally to the door behind. Moving backwards from the main door, the front entrance of the Church of Santa Maria in Campitelli begins to move, until it coincides perfectly when you reach the threshold of the door of the Palazzetto. Here the magic happens. From the door of the building, the entrance to the church is framed millimetrically, thanks to that magical orthogonality conceived by the genius of the masters. We come now to the other masterpiece, the Palazzetto integration. In 1616, the municipality of Rome granted permission to build the overpass designed by the master to connect the two buildings. It is again Girolamo Rinaldi who carries out the design intentions. On the first floor of the new building, the access to the ancient Palazzetto is realized, creating an effect that confuses and disorients those who enter the building. In fact, you have the sensation of not perceiving the passage from the main body to the ancient building behind it. A further perspective trick contributes to the magic, allowing you to see the hanging garden as soon as you open the entrance door on the first floor of the large building. Thus, an architectural masterpiece comes to life that only through the collaboration of various geniuses could it emerge so perfect in its executive realization. Palazzetto inside Palazzo Albertoni Spinola is therefore a living and unique architectural jewel in the world. Fruit of the talent of the greatest architects of the Italian Renaissance, an immortal work located in the heart of the culture of mankind. Within the suggestive backdrop of the Eternal City, St. Peter's and the Palazzetto look at each other.